I never told my daughter what I kept locked away in that safe deposit box at the credit union on Maple Avenue. When she married Marcus, I made sure he never got anywhere near it, not even a hint that it existed. I was sitting on my back porch in Columbus, watching the sun drop behind the neighbor's oak tree, when my phone buzzed. My daughter never called on a Tuesday evening unless something had gone wrong. She always texted. Always. So when I saw her name on the screen, I felt it before I even answered. Dad. Her voice was tight, like she was trying to hold something together. Marcus found the paperwork, the stuff from the credit union. He's been going through my files. Before we get into the rest of this, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know who's out here with me tonight. I set down my sweet tea and walked inside. My late wife Eleanor had always said I kept too much inside, that I carried weight I should have put down years ago. She was right about most things. She was right about this too, though I didn't fully understand what she meant until that evening, standing in my kitchen, listening to my daughter try not to cry. "Felicity," I said slowly, "did he find the account number?" She hesitated. "I think so. He's been asking me questions, Dad, about what's in your name, about whether the house goes to me, about whether there's life insurance. He called your credit union this afternoon pretending to be your son. They wouldn't give him anything, but they called me because I'm listed as your secondary contact." I stood very still. 10 years. 10 years of watching, waiting, documenting, and preparing for a day I'd hoped would never come. And now, here it was, arriving like weather I'd seen on the radar for a long time. Has he said anything to Felicity directly? "She is Felicity, Dad." "It's me." "I know, sweetheart. I meant to say, has he confronted you about it? He said you've been hiding assets from us, that it's not fair. That as my husband, he has a right to know what our financial future looks like. Our financial future." I pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of my nose. "Listen to me carefully. I need you to go to your sister's house tonight. Pack what you need for a few days and go. Don't explain anything to Marcus. Just tell him you need some time with Patricia. I'll be on the road by morning." "Dad, what's going on? There are things I should have told you sooner. Things your mother made me promise to explain when the time was right." "I think we've reached that time." I could hear her breathing on the other end. She was 34 years old, and she'd always been the kind of person who kept her composure even when everything around her was unraveling. She got that from Eleanor. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll go to Patricia's. Good girl. Don't say anything to Marcus about where you're going. Just go." After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a long moment. Eleanor's photo was on the refrigerator, the one from our trip to Savannah 12 years ago, a week before she got the diagnosis. She was laughing at something I'd said, her head thrown back, completely unselfconscious. That was Eleanor in full. That was the woman I'd built everything for. "I'm sorry it took this long," I said to the photo, "but I think tonight's the night." I started packing a bag. Let me tell you about Marcus. I want to be fair, because I've spent a long time thinking about whether I was too hard on him, whether I let my protectiveness cloud my judgment. I've gone back and forth on it, but the facts are the facts, and facts don't change just because you want them to. Felicity met Marcus at a company happy hour 4 years ago. She was working in healthcare administration downtown, the job she'd worked her way into after finishing her degree at Ohio State. She called me that Friday night sounding lighter than she had in years. "Dad, I met someone. He's funny, he listens. He asked me about my job like he actually wanted to know." I was happy for her. I truly was. Eleanor had died 8 months before that, and watching Felicity grieve while also managing my own grief had been one of the harder things I'd done. I wanted good things for her. The first time Marcus came to Sunday dinner, he arrived 20 minutes late with a bottle of wine and a big handshake and a way of filling a room that I'd seen before. I'd spent 30 years in insurance, mostly commercial accounts, and I'd sat across the table from a lot of charming people. Charm is a tool. Most people who rely on it heavily are hiding something under it. He was attentive to Felicity all evening, touching her shoulder, laughing at her stories. That part was genuine, I think. But he was also paying a different kind of attention to the rest of the house. He complimented my kitchen renovation, asked how long I'd lived in the neighborhood, mentioned that property values on the east side had really climbed lately, hadn't they? Probably some equity built up in a place like this. I kept my expression neutral and changed the subject. Over the next few months, the pattern became clearer. Marcus worked in sales for a software company. He made decent money, he said. He liked to dress well, drove a 4-year-old Audi he clearly stretched to afford, and had opinions about restaurants that suggested he spent more than he earned. But the specific things he said to Felicity and the questions he steered her toward asking me, those were what I watched most carefully. He started suggesting she should understand the family finances better, that it was responsible, as a couple, to have a clear picture of generational wealth, that couples who don't talk about money end up blindsided. He'd read an article. He was just thinking about their future. Felicity mentioned it to me one afternoon over coffee. Marcus thinks I should ask you about your estate plan. Not in a greedy way. He just says it's smart to understand these things. Smart. The word sat between us. Your future with me, I told her carefully, is that I will always be here if you need help. But Marcus is your partner, not my heir. I've made sure you'll be taken care of. You don't need to manage it or monitor it. That's my job right now. She looked slightly embarrassed, like she knew the question hadn't fully originated with her. When Marcus proposed, the ring was a 2-carat diamond from a jeweler on the high end of Short North. I'd guess $6,000 or $7,000. Felicity showed me a photo, and her face was lit up in a way that made it impossible to say what I was thinking, so I said I was happy for her, and I meant the part about wanting her to be happy. That part was completely true. The wedding was at a vineyard outside Columbus. Beautiful venue. Between the catering, the flowers, the photographer, and the band, it ran close to $40,000. Marcus's parents contributed some. I contributed more, because Felicity was my daughter and I was not going to let money be the reason the day didn't feel special. But I watched Marcus's eyes move to me when the final catering invoice came up in conversation, and I saw him calculate something behind his smile. What I did not tell him, or Felicity, at that point was what Eleanor and I had set up years earlier. Eleanor had been a middle school teacher for 26 years. People underestimate teachers when it comes to financial sense. My wife was methodical about money in ways I never was. She'd been investing since her 20s, quietly, consistently, index funds and municipal bonds and a teacher's pension, and a house we paid off 11 years before she died. And in the last year of her life, when she was clear-headed enough to plan but honest enough with herself about what was coming, she'd sat down with our estate attorney and made sure every piece was in the right place. I need to make sure Felicity is protected from someone who might see her as a means to an end, she told the attorney. I watched that happen. I won't let it happen to my daughter. We'd structured everything through a revocable trust that became irrevocable when Eleanor died. The house was in the trust. My retirement accounts named Felicity as sole beneficiary with the payout going directly into a separate protected account. We'd also set aside a specific fund, funded by Eleanor's life insurance, that could only be accessed by Felicity for education, health care, or a primary home purchase. Marcus could not touch any of it, not as a spouse, not with a power of attorney, not with a court order on normal marital property grounds. And I had kept a journal, a legal pad at first, then a proper notebook I bought at the Barnes & Noble on Easton. I'd been keeping notes on Marcus for 3 years. Every red flag, every financial maneuver, every conversation he tried to steer in a direction that led toward my assets or toward convincing Felicity to pressure me. I kept the notebook in the safe deposit box at the credit union, along with copies of every trust document, every account statement, and a sealed letter I'd written to Felicity the same week Eleanor died, explaining everything. The drive from Columbus to Cincinnati, where Felicity was living, took about an hour and 40 minutes on a clear day. I left at 6 in the morning and the highway was quiet. Just semis and early commuters and the flat Ohio farmland going gray-green in the spring light. I thought about Eleanor the whole way, about the conversations we'd had in the hospital, the things she'd said when she was tired and honest and not trying to protect anyone. She'd grown up watching her own father drain the family savings in a series of bad investments and worse decisions. She'd watched her mother work 2 jobs to keep the house and still lose it eventually. Eleanor had sworn she would never let that happen to her own children, and she had spent 26 years of teaching and saving and planning to make sure of it. She was the careful one, I told myself as I drove. I was just the executor. I pulled up to Patricia's house in Mount Lookout little after 8. Felicity was in the kitchen with her sister and her sister's husband, all 3 of them drinking coffee and looking like they hadn't slept. Felicity stood up when she saw me and I could see how tired she was. Not just from the night, but from months of something she hadn't let herself name yet. "Dad," she said, "tell me what's going on." We sat down. Patricia's husband, a decent man named Arthur, quietly took his coffee to the other room and shut the door. He understood. "Start from the beginning," Felicity said. So I did. I told her about the trust, about the safe deposit box, about the journal. I told her about the conversation I'd had with Eleanor in the hospital and about our attorney, a woman named Sandra who'd been practicing estate law in Columbus for 35 years and who had put together the most airtight documents I'd ever seen. "How much is it worth?" Felicity asked quietly when I finished. "The house is paid off," I said, "assessed at around $420,000 in today's market. The retirement accounts are just over $900,000. The fund from your mother's life insurance has grown to about $215,000. Total, you're looking at somewhere between 1.4 and 1.5 million when you account for everything." She stared at me. Mom built most of that. The investment habits, the pension, the discipline. I just didn't touch it and kept adding to it. She was quiet for a moment. "Does Marcus know any of this?" "He suspects there's something. He doesn't know the structure. He's been trying to figure it out for months. That's why he called the credit union. She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I've seen him," she said carefully, "watching you. Asking questions he frames as being about us, but that are really about you." I nodded. "I have 3 years of documentation in that safe deposit box. Every time he made a move toward our finances, every time he used you to try to get information from me, every time he said something that didn't add up." She looked up sharply. "Such as?" "March of last year," I said. "He told you his company was doing well and that you two were finally getting ahead. But 3 weeks later, he asked to borrow $4,000 from you for a car repair. You gave it to him from your personal savings." Her expression changed. "He also told you he was contributing equally to your joint account, but you mentioned to me in September that the mortgage on your condo was 2 months behind because of cash flow. His cash was flowing somewhere. I don't know where. But it wasn't toward your joint responsibilities." She set the mug down. "I thought I was imagining it. I thought I was being paranoid. You weren't." Patricia came back in quietly and sat down at the end of the table. She didn't say anything. She just put her hand over her sister's. "I need to go home," Felicity said. "I need to talk to him." "I think that's right. But I'm coming with you." When we pulled up to Felicity's condo in Hyde Park that afternoon, both cars were in the parking lot. Marcus was there. He opened the door before Felicity could get her key out, and his expression shifted when he saw me standing behind her. He'd been preparing something. Whatever it was, he hadn't prepared for me to be part of it. He was wearing a nice shirt, the kind of thing you put on when you wanted to look reasonable. His hands were relaxed. He was good at appearing relaxed. "Richard," he said, using my first name in a way that was meant to signal confidence. "I think it's time we all had an honest conversation." I agreed with that completely. We sat in the living room. It was a nice condo. Felicity had decorated it carefully over the past 3 years. Small prints on the walls, plants on the windowsills, the kind of home that takes real effort to make feel like a home. I looked at it and felt something quiet and sad, because I knew what the next hour was going to cost. Marcus leaned forward first. "I'll be direct. I've been trying to understand the family's financial situation for a while now, and I keep hitting walls. Felicity is your only child. What you built over your lifetime affects our future. I think I have a right, as her husband, to understand what we're working with." "What you're working with," I said, "is what Felicity and Marcus have built together. What I've built is mine to manage." He smiled, the patient smile of someone who thinks he's being reasonable while the other person is being difficult. "I'm not trying to interfere. I'm trying to plan. You called my credit union 2 days ago and told them you were my son." His smile didn't move, but something behind it did. "I was trying to understand the structure of your accounts. For estate planning purposes." "That's called fraud," I said. "Impersonating a family member to access someone's financial information. I spoke with the credit union manager yesterday. She documented the call. He shifted. I thought it was a joint account that Felicity was connected to. It isn't. Nothing I own is jointly titled with you. Nothing ever will be." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Felicity was watching him carefully. I could see her doing it, cataloging his reactions the same way I'd been teaching her to do without realizing I was teaching her. "Marcus," she said quietly, "the $4,000, last March. He looked at her. What? You said it was for the car. But the car had nothing wrong with it. I checked the service records when you went to get the oil changed in July. There was no major repair. He opened his mouth and closed it, and the joint account, she continued. You told me your direct deposit was going in every 2 weeks, but when I balanced it in October, the deposits were smaller than they should have been. I let it go because I didn't want to make it into something. But I've been making it into nothing for a long time, haven't I? It wasn't a question. I pulled the notebook out of my bag, the one from Barnes & Noble, worn now at the corners from 3 years of handling. I opened it to the first marked page. September 14th, 3 years ago. First Sunday dinner. Quote, these East Side neighborhoods have really appreciated, haven't they? You must have some equity built up. You said that before you'd finished your second glass of wine and before you'd asked my daughter a single question about her life. Marcus, I said quietly. I turned several pages. March 3rd, 2 years ago. You told Felicity she should ask me about estate planning. You'd been married 6 months. I flipped further. November 9th, 18 months ago. You suggested Felicity put your name on her car title for insurance purposes. She didn't, but you asked 3 times. His jaw was tight now. You've been surveilling me. In my own home. In my wife's family. I've been watching over my daughter. That's not surveillance. That's parenthood. He turned to Felicity. Honey, this is what I've been trying to tell you. Your father has never accepted me. He's been working against our marriage from the beginning. He's a reason we've had problems, because I've never been good enough for him, because he controls you through money and guilt. Felicity looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I have your iPad passcode. His face went still. I've had it for 2 years. You gave it to me when you were sick that one weekend, and you needed me to answer some emails for you. You never changed it. She picked up her phone and opened the iPad app that let her see his messages through the shared iCloud. I watched her face as she read. I watched her expression move through something that looked like grief and then settle into something harder. There's a woman named Brittany, she said finally, not looking up. Who is she? He didn't answer. She's been texting you for 8 months. She calls you babe. She says, she stopped. She says you keep telling her you're working on getting things sorted with your situation. The room was silent. She put the phone down. She looked at him with an expression I recognized, because it was the same expression Eleanor had the one time in 32 years of marriage, that she told me something I didn't want to hear but needed to. It was the expression of someone who has stopped flinching. You should go, Felicity said. Felicity, I want you to leave. Tonight. Take what you need and go. He tried several more things. He said she was being impulsive. He said her father had poisoned her. He said she'd regret this. He said she'd regret this. He said the condo was half his, and she couldn't just decide this unilaterally. The condo, I said, is in Felicity's name only. She purchased it before you met. You are not on the deed. I checked the title last year. He stared at me. The prenuptial agreement you signed before the wedding specifies that all assets held individually before the marriage remain separate property. Our attorney drafted it. You signed it. It's valid and enforceable in Ohio. I watched the color leave his face as the full picture assembled itself in front of him. He'd spent 3 years mapping a treasure he had no legal path to reach. You planned this, he said. Eleanor planned it, I said. I just carried it out. He left an hour later with a duffel bag and the Audi he was still making payments on. He texted Felicity 11 times that night, alternating between apologies and accusations. She read them once and turned her phone face down on Patricia's coffee table. We were back at Patricia's by 9 o'clock. Felicity sat on the couch for a long time without saying anything. Patricia brought tea. Arthur put on something quiet on the television and then turned it off again. Eventually, the house got very still. I should have seen it sooner, Felicity said. You saw what you were ready to see. I made excuses for so many things. The money, the way he talked to me when no one was around, the fact that I was always the one managing everything while he just sort of floated through our life. I called that his personality. I called that his personality. I called that the way he was raised. Those are the hardest things to see clearly when you love someone. She looked at her hands. Did Mom know? What Marcus was? She didn't know Marcus specifically. But she knew someone like him would come eventually. Not because she thought badly of you, because she loved you enough to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Felicity was quiet for a moment. That sounds exactly like her. We talked until midnight. About Eleanor. About the trust. About what Felicity wanted her life to look like now, on the other side of 3 years of something she was still working out how to name. At some point, Patricia fell asleep on the armchair, and Arthur put a blanket over her and went to bed himself. And it was just the two of us in the lamplit living room, the way it had been so many evenings after Eleanor died. "I want to see the safe deposit box," Felicity said finally. "Tomorrow we'll go together." The next morning we drove to the credit union on Maple Avenue. The manager, a patient woman named Barbara who had been there for 20 years, greeted us with the particular warmth of someone who has dealt with a lot of complicated family situations and carries no judgment about any of them. "Mr. Ashford," she said. "She's the one who'd flagged the unauthorized call. We went to the private room and I put in the key. The box wasn't large, a standard size, but it was organized with the same precision Eleanor had applied to everything." Felicity went through the folders slowly. The trust documents, the account statements, the deed to the house, the life insurance policy, and in the very front, in an envelope with her name on it in Eleanor's handwriting, the letter. She held it without opening it for almost a full minute. Then she opened it. I didn't read it with her. I'd read it once when Eleanor gave it to me the week before she died, and I'd put it away because I couldn't hold it and function at the same time. I sat across the table and watched my daughter's face move through 7 or 8 different expressions while she read her mother's words. When she finished, she folded it carefully along the original creases and held it in her lap. "She said I'd know when I was ready," Felicity said. "She said when the right moment came, you'd know how to give it to me." Eleanor was almost never wrong about timing. She said real love doesn't audit you. She said the person worth staying with is the one who's still there when there's nothing to gain. Felicity looked up. I think I'd been confusing someone who wanted what I had with someone who wanted me. I had no words for that, because she had said it exactly right. It took 4 months for the divorce to finalize. Marcus's attorney took one look at the prenuptial agreement and the trust structure and advised him to accept the settlement. He walked away with his personal belongings, the Audi he was still underwater on, and a lesson I genuinely hope he took seriously. Last I heard, he'd moved to Pittsburgh. I don't know anything beyond that, and I don't need to. Felicity moved back into her condo and spent a month going through every drawer and shelf, cleaning out the spaces that had been his, reclaiming the place as her own. She called it decluttering. I think it was something more than that. By summer, she'd started going to a financial literacy class at the library on Tuesday evenings. Not because she needed the basics, she was already careful with money, but because she said she wanted to understand everything, every piece of it, so that she'd never again defer the financial picture of her own life to someone else. She started taking long walks in the morning. She called me more. It's Sunday now, and we have a standing dinner. Sometimes I cook, which Felicity tolerates with grace because she knows I try. Sometimes she brings something from the Thai place near her office. We eat at the kitchen table, where Eleanor and I ate for 30 years, under the light fixture Eleanor chose because she liked the way it made the room look like evening was always just settling in. A few weeks ago, Felicity came in carrying a bottle of wine, and a look on her face I recognized as her thinking about something she wanted to say carefully. "I'd been talking to someone," she said. She sat down. "His name is James. He teaches high school history over in Westerville. We met at the library." She smiled in a way that was slight and real and nothing like performance. "He asked me what I was reading before he asked me what I did for work. That's a good sign. I told him everything. About Marcus, about the divorce, about all of it. First conversation, basically." "What did he say?" "She said he'd said he was sorry she'd gone through that, and then he'd asked if she wanted to talk about something else entirely, and they'd talked for 2 hours about everything else entirely." "I like that," I said. "I'm not in a rush," she said. "But I wanted you to know." We ate dinner. We talked about Eleanor, the way we always do at some point. About a trip the 3 of us had taken to the Smoky Mountains when Felicity was 11, and about the ceramic cardinal that Eleanor had bought at a gift shop there that still sat on the windowsill above my kitchen sink. About how Eleanor had always said that the mountains made everything that felt urgent feel properly small. After dinner, Felicity helped me with the dishes. Standing at the sink, she said, "I want to do something with part of the trust, when the time is right." "What kind of something?" She handed me a plate to dry. There are women at my financial literacy class who are there because someone took advantage of them. Spouses, partners, family members. Some of them have nothing. I keep thinking about what Mom set up for me and about how lucky I was that someone loved me enough to build something solid around me before I needed it. Not everyone has that. She turned off the water. What if we set up a fund, small to start, maybe through a nonprofit downtown that works with women coming out of financial abuse situations? Help them get stable, get legal advice, get a real foothold. I put down the dish towel. We could call it the Eleanor Ashford Fund. I had to look away for a moment, at the ceramic cardinal on the windowsill, at the evening light coming through the window the way Eleanor had always liked it. She would have loved that more than anything, I said. We spent the rest of the evening working out the shape of it. By the time Felicity left, we had a plan. Not a finished thing, but the beginning of one. The kind Eleanor always said was the most important part. I stood on the front porch and watched her taillights disappear down the street. The neighborhood was quiet. The oak tree across the way was almost fully leafed out, heavy and green in the way of Ohio late spring. I'd lived on this street for 31 years and I still noticed the seasons here like they were new every time. I went back inside, past Eleanor's photo on the refrigerator, stopped. We did right by her, I said quietly. She's going to be okay. And standing there in the kitchen where Eleanor had planned and cooked and sat up late with a yellow legal pad working out how to love our daughter past her own lifetime, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, something steadier than that. The safe deposit box on Maple Avenue still holds every document, every protection Eleanor set in motion. But it isn't just paperwork anymore. It's a physical record of what it looks like when someone loves you with their whole practical heart, when they sit down in the middle of the worst thing that's ever happened to them and refuse to leave you unprotected. Sienna walked away with nothing, the video said, but the woman who tried to take what wasn't hers from my daughter Marcus, who thought charm was a substitute for character, he left with less than he came in with. Not because I trapped him or outsmarted him, but because Eleanor, 12 years gone, had been smarter than any of it before it even started. Some people see a family and think, what can I take from this? They look at a house and see equity, look at a retirement account and see access, look at a grieving widower with one daughter and see an angle. They never see the real thing. The thing that was always there under the surface of every document and every protection and every careful plan. Just love. Stubborn, organized, 12 years outlasting love. That's the only inheritance that ever truly mattered. And it can't be accessed by anyone who didn't earn it. If this story stayed with you, I want you to hear this. Tell the people you love what you've built for them. Not just the financial part, but the why behind it. Don't wait until it's too late to say out loud that you've been paying attention, that you've been protecting them, that you always will. Those words are worth more than any document. And if you're out there tonight feeling unseen or taken advantage of, please know that there are people in this world who have quietly been keeping watch. Sometimes love looks like a locked box at the credit union. Sometimes it looks like a letter with your name on it that's been waiting for exactly the right moment to reach you. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Share your story in the comments if this touched something in you. Subscribe to Voices of Uncle Vincent and share this with someone who needs to hear it. I've had a lot of time to sit with this story since that night. Not just the events of it, but what it cost and what it returned. And the thing I keep coming back to isn't Marcus. He's the least interesting part of all of this. People like Marcus exist everywhere, in every city, in every family somewhere down the line. What I keep coming back to is Eleanor, a woman who was dying, who had every reason to spend her final months thinking only about herself and her pain, and who instead sat down with a legal pad and thought about a future she wouldn't live to see. That's not something that happens by accident. That's character. That's what a life spent making honest choices actually looks like when it's tested at the worst possible moment. I used to think wisdom was something that arrived when you got older, like it came with the territory. I don't believe that anymore. Eleanor was wise because she had spent decades paying attention to people, to patterns, to the difference between what someone says and what they actually do. She watched her own mother lose everything to someone who charmed his way into the family finances, and instead of just grieving it, she learned from it. She turned that pain into preparation. That's not luck. That's a specific kind of intelligence that most of us have access to but don't always choose to develop. Marcus made his choices too, and they followed him the way choices do. Every small deception, every borrowed dollar with no intention of returning it, every conversation steered toward what he could extract rather than what he could contribute. Those weren't isolated incidents. They were a direction. And directions, if you hold them long enough, become destinations. He arrived exactly where those choices were always taking him, alone, with less than he came in with, and a lesson he'll either learn or repeat. Felicity came through it. That's the part I'm most proud of, and I want to be careful to give her the credit, because she did the harder thing. I just kept records. She had to live inside that marriage, had to find her way out of it with her dignity still intact, had to look at a person she'd loved and see them clearly after years of choosing not to. That takes a particular kind of courage that I'm not sure I would have managed at 34. What I want to say to anyone sitting with this tonight is something simple. The people who love you most sometimes showed in ways that looked nothing like love in the moment. A locked box, a sealed letter, a prenuptial agreement signed at a kitchen table with an estate attorney neither of you wanted to need. Those are love. Stubborn, practical, unglamorous love. And the people who are building something real in your life will never resent you for protecting what you've worked for. They'll understand it. They'll respect it. That's one of the clearest ways I know to tell the difference. I'm not a man who talks easily about these things. Eleanor always said I kept too much inside. She was right, but tonight I wanted to say it plainly. Build carefully, watch closely, protect honestly. And when someone shows you who they are through the small things, believe them early. It saves everyone a great deal of time.